Morning, everyone. I'm Judah Stravchinsky. We're going to just get going in about a minute. We're just opening to let people in right now. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that CPATA is the federal regulator of patent agents and trademark agents with staff and licensees living and working throughout the country. Turtle Island, North America, is land that is being inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning of time immemorial. Today, this meeting is still the home to many Indigenous people, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Thank you for joining CPATA today on our second anniversary of coming into force. I wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge how far we've all come in 2 years and what's on the horizon for CPATA. For those who were able to attend our AGM or our most recent board meeting in May, much of what I'll be speaking about today may sound familiar, but please stay with us because there will be lots of time for questions. I'm hoping to take about half of today to talk a little bit about where we've come from and where we're going, and then open it all up to questions and answer. And we're also, this is a first for us, and we're going to hopefully have webinars and Q&As on a more regular basis. We'd love to hear from you afterwards about what you think about this first go round. And we'll be sending a short survey to those who attended today. Give us your feedback, be as candid as you can to help us adapt and improve. So first off for today, my hope is to just give a little bit of background to talk a little bit about where we've come and where we're going. And it all starts during the pandemic, really, because as you know, we came into force in the beginning of, or during the height of the pandemic. We received no startup funding from government other than a transfer from CPO, and soon got busy building the regulatory framework. The creation of an independent regulator is intended to bring many benefits to both the patent and trademark agent profession in Canada more broadly. Before CPATA was created, and I see many of our attendees today are patent and trademark agents, and we know that there are many excellent patent and trademark agents. And before our creation, significant work was being undertaken to move this group towards a true profession. And the creation of CPATA makes sure that all patent and trademark agents become part of a profession with defined standards that apply globally and competencies that apply to all. Knowing that agents are subject to rigorous competency requirements and standards builds public confidence in the profession, and robust profession is going to enhance access to competent expert IP services in the longer term. And that's going to bring positive ripple effects that will be felt throughout the IP ecosystem, the Canadian economy over time, and for those who are already within this profession. In terms of what we do, it's important to root this in our statute. It's the federal government that created CPATA through the CPATA Act. And if you haven't had a chance to look at what it sets out, it's the guiding principles for us. It sets out what we're responsible for in terms of what we must do, as well as how we do it through our governance model. The Act sets the purpose of the college, which is to regulate patent agents and trademark agents in the public interest, to enhance the public's ability to secure the rights under the Patent Act and the Trademark Act. So as you all know, before the college, there was some oversight of patent and trademark agents provided both by CPO through the CPO is well known to most of you. It's a branch of the federal government, and IPIC, which is the trade association for patent IP professionals. CPATA is responsible for more than what IPIC and CPO jointly managed previously. Our areas of responsibility include setting standards, including entry to practice requirements, setting and administering qualifying exams, managing licensing, and receiving and investigating, and at times taking further actions with respect to complaints through a discipline system. We also set standards for professional liability insurance requirements, and those are just naming a few of our core responsibilities. Our early work to date has already elevated the profession. We have an up-to-date registry where the public can search to find all those who are licensed as patent agent and trademark agents. IPIC did some great work setting up a voluntary code for its members, but through the shift to the professional regulator that is where our mandate applies to all licensees, now all licensees are subject to a mandatory code of conduct and are expected to meet the professional standards set in it. Agents are now required to have insurance when they offer services directly to the public. That's an important aspect of public protection, and it serves the interests of licensees as well. CPATA has an open and transparent complaint system, and since coming into force, we've started to investigate matters, both with respect to allegations of unauthorized practice, but also with respect to complaints against licensees. And just this year alone, we've already received 7 conduct inquiries to date. We have 3 complaints that are active, and we also have 11 ethical inquiries, which are questions that have been submitted by licensees themselves in order to understand their ethical obligations and to receive input from us proactively. CPATA is doing a lot of work in the area of competency now, and I'll be talking more about that over the next few minutes. We've been describing what knowledge and skills practitioners need to serve the public, and by being transparent about this, we're helping develop a level of understanding and greater clarity, greater expectation for both the public and licensees, for the public with respect to what they can expect from agents, but also for future potential IP agents to know what are the expectations should they wish to pursue a career in this field. The impact of all of these areas of professional regulation are that it will elevate the profession over time in the public eye. And this is a positive that we see as in general, as we've seen professions move from less regulated to more independently regulated, is that the public then is able to see the global benefits, as are those who are licensed. So in terms of how we do it, there's been much discussion about this over the last several months. The Act created CPATA as an independent public interest regulator. So in deciding how patent and trademark agents should be regulated, and there was a push for regulation of patent and trademark agents for many years, the government ultimately decided that folding the regulation of patent and trademark agents into the federal government would not serve the public well. It similarly decided, however, that the regulation of patent and trademark agents should not be left to a model of pure self-regulation either. What we actually experience in Canada is sort of an in-between approach, which is an independent regulator, which is where many professional regulators are currently moving towards. And that's where the federal government moved in this case, to create CPATA as an independent body in a manner that would include expertise from the profession to make sure that the patent and trademark agent professions are regulated in a manner that recognizes the needs and expertise of the profession, while at the same time ensuring that there were broader considerations and the public interest and public consumer needs as well would be reflected in our governance structure. So what we have is a board that consists of 9 directors. 4 are licensees elected from the profession, and 5 have been appointed by the minister. All our members on the board have deep and diverse experience, and the licensee directors have significant IP subject matter expertise that is brought to bear on this mandate. Patent and trademark agents continue to play a vital role in all aspects of our work. We have patent and trademark agents on our regulatory committees and who help us with setting and reviewing exams. We currently work with approximately 80 patent and trademark agents to help us do our work. This work would not be possible without the licensees as at the core of the work. As I'll describe a bit later today, there are going to be times when we'll be reaching out to the profession to make sure that we understand views as we continue to build and to roll out programming. So please keep following our monthly newsletters and follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook to stay up to date on our activities. Just a few things about CPATA generally, because we're a bit different, and I think it's important to spend a couple of minutes just reflecting on that. First off, we are a unique regulator that's been built for Canada's IP ecosystem. We're independent, but we're also federal, and that's a different in jurisdiction that is notable, because most professions are regulated at the provincial level, but due to the federal nature of intellectual property, we're a federal regulator. There's only one other federal professional legal services regulator in Canada, and that created by the federal government. That's the College of Immigration Consultants. As a point of comparison, they have over 13,000 licensees. Their consultants generally pay $1,800 per year in licensing fees. And that entity has multiple offices across Canada and over 100 staff. In comparison, CPATA is virtual. We're small. We have a very small team. We only have 6 full-time working staff, and we work from our homes across the country. So I've welcomed you into my basement today. A choice was made early on to reduce costs by not having physical offices. We also save on costs by using experts only when necessary, rather than having them on full-time staff. So we don't have in-house investigators, but we outsource that work when needed. We don't have in-house discipline counsel. We only retain counsel as needed. To that point, we're a right touch regulator. From the very beginning, both in terms of our policy development and operations, we've been agile, targeted, and proportional. One example is the early resolution mechanism we have in place to help resolve concerns about agents quickly and to try to avoid lengthy proceedings wherever possible. The inquiry option that we have for those within the profession to write us with ethical inquiries is another similar example of how we've been trying to develop right touch approaches that best serve the profession and the public. We also have modern governance. As I mentioned, we have a national board, and we have committees that reflect CPATA's national mandate and include experts from the patent agent and trademark professions. We've also adopted the regulatory best practice of compensating directors and committee members. We're a professional regulator, and like many others, have shifted from a quasi-volunteer approach to recruiting for expertise and providing compensation that's been indexed and benchmarked to those who provide their time and expertise to us. Finally, in terms of what sets us apart, is that we have a truly unique licensee population. It brings strengths, but it also brings challenges. The strength is the patent and trademark agents themselves. They are experts and have a high level of expertise and integrity. However, it's a very disparate profession. Licensees live and work across Canada. They work in both official languages and in many different types of environments, in private practice, in solo firms, in large firms, in boutique settings, in multinational law firms and legal services firms, in-house environments, and in government agencies. They come from different educational and professional backgrounds. Some are used to being regulated. For others, being part of CPATA is the first time that they're being regulated. It's also a small group. We only have just under 3,000 licensees. We have approximately 2,700 licensed at the moment, and only approximately just over 1,750 Class 1 licensees, and about 200 Class 2 licensees and just over 250 trainees. What that means is that we have a relatively small group. It's also relatively stagnant, meaning that based on our recent surveys of the profession, the same number of individuals who are entering the profession through the apprenticeships is about marking the pace at which people are leaving the profession for various reasons. So all of that makes our work unique. So let's spend a few moments talking about the work that we have done to date. In the first 2 years, CPATA has built out much of the infrastructure required for a modern regulator. The story really is told quite clearly in our annual reports. If you haven't seen them yet, they're not long reads. I'd encourage you to see them. They're online for 2022 and 2021. But a lot's been done very quickly. In the first 2 years, we've developed our governance and regulatory policies that set how we work. We've had to hire the staff to do the work. We've populated the regulatory committees. In professional regulation, it's often committees that drive much of the work, and the government created mandatory committees, and we've had to add committees to help our board govern in the public interest. And so we have a registration committee, a governance committee, investigations committee, a discipline committee, and an audit and risk committee. All of those need to be populated. They need to be evergreened. We need to make sure that those committees are supported by staff as well. We've had to build operational infrastructure. Early things involved taking data from CPO, cleaning it up, and being able to build a current agent portal and online register. And so now people from all over the world can search for IP agents who are in, to make sure that you are in good standing, to make sure they're in good standing, to make sure that they are not dealing with an unauthorized practitioner, for example. We took over qualifying examinations, and we had to administer them virtually for the first time, given the pandemic. And we've been making incremental improvements with each administration. We've also established a fair, transparent, and efficient professional responsibility process. And as I mentioned, have introduced professional liability insurance requirements. Recently, we've gone through some important projects, a bylaw revision project that improved our ability to regulate in the public interest. One aspect set in the bylaws is new categories of license based on what we heard about where agents are practicing. We wanted to make sure that those in-house had the ability to continue that work in a category of license that fit their area. And we have that now online through a new Class 2 license. We also have the new fees that are coming online for licensing in January of next year. We've had many touch points with the profession and stakeholders around the fact that there are costs associated with administering a regulator, and that one that has so much that we need to accomplish. In addition to building the college to become fully operational, we need to develop reserves, which are just another way of saying savings for the long term for operational matters as may be required, as well as for complex complaints, investigations, and unauthorized practice situations. What that means is that our expenses are going to increase as we move forward towards full operational levels, and to account for the complaints, investigations, and discipline process coming into full operation. As I mentioned in our annual general meeting, our costs have moved from just over 1.4 million in the first part of 2021 to just under 2.3 million in our first full year 2022. Our budget has expenses of 2.3 million again this year, but that does not include any funds to save for reserves. Although 22 and 23 had about the same amount of expenses, the nature of the expenses have moved from some of the startup costs around HR recruitment and regulatory consulting and some government relations work to program development costs around our discipline program, competency initiatives, and staff wages as we've grown. We're in the middle of our budget development for 2024. We expect that as we move towards full operation, expenses before savings for reserves will increase. We're continuing to evaluate new program costs and estimate regulatory program costs. It's very fluid, and I've been very candid about that. But our current estimate, which is of course subject to change, is that our expenses will likely increase to the $2.8 to $3 million range without budgeting for exceptional complex cases, which may arise, or setting aside funds to establish reserves. So how much we're going to be able to save to put towards reserves will depend on our revenues next year. Starting in 2025, though, we expect to build multi-year budgets. The licensing fees going forward are indexed to calculation based on inflation. And so the 2024 big increase is not something that anyone should expect will continue on the go forward. You should expect that from that number, it will be an indexed gentle increase if there is inflation. Perhaps most importantly around what's happened in the last couple of years has been the work around competencies. CPATA has created competency profiles for patent and trademark agents. Prior to the creation of these profiles, there was no clearly understood consensus on what competencies an individual would need to serve clients effectively as a patent agent or a trademark agent. The process to create the competencies was robust. CPATA consulted with the patent and trademark agents to ensure that we got this right for the Canadian context. And now that we have those profiles in place, we can continue to build entry to practice systems, make sure that individuals acquire these competencies effectively, that we can have qualifying exams that test to those competencies, and that we have in the future continuing professional development requirements that focus on licensees being able to build and maintain these diverse competencies. So that was a key development for the regulator, and it's from there that we are moving towards our priorities for 2023 to 2025. The first 2 years has been marked by significant change for CPATA, for licensees, and for other stakeholders. And as anyone who attended our AGM or most recent board meeting will know, change is going to continue to be a key theme for the next few years. The board approved CPATA's strategic framework for 23 to 25 at its May board meeting. The framework is available online. I decided not to put it on the screen because it would be hard to see, but I encourage you to review it even as I go through this next, an overview of it. You can find it at CPATA's website, just under the About Us tab, and you can link, there's a PDF of it there. It's a short 2-page document. The first page talks about our regulatory principles, and the second page provides the 23 to 25 plan or vision. It's comprised of 5 interconnected pillars. The first is around our organizational and regulatory infrastructure. We're still building the modern regulator. Currently, we have an online agent portal, but it's missing features that we're going to need. We, for example, don't have an application portal yet to enable those who are wishing to apply into the profession to do so online. It's a very manual process. We're hoping to bring in some efficiencies in that regard. We also are intending to build an annual report for licensees. While we did survey the profession at one point, it was an optional exercise and didn't provide us with all of the data, and data in this area quickly becomes stale dated. We're proposing a simple online questionnaire that's going to take only a few minutes of licensee time, but that's going to give CPATA the data it needs for year-over-year regulatory decision-making. And the report will help us understand trends, changes in the market, and demographics around the profession. We're likely going to start that in 2025. We are going to bring draft questions to the profession and to stakeholders for consultation. We also have to finish building elements that will ensure that we're able to comply with federal legislation that we are subject to. And we need to continue to prepare enterprise risk and cybersecurity protocols. As we are a fully virtual organization, this is mission critical work that is needed. Final element of this first pillar is our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. There's tremendous work already being done in this area. We know that IPIC, ISED, CIPO are all doing very important work on DEI or EDI. There's truly good work, for example, by IPIC offering continuing education on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we're carefully determining how we can supplement this work and bring our expertise to the table as it relates to our mandate to make sure that we can be supportive and continue to build an inclusive profession and one that can serve diverse clients. Our second pillar is around professional competency, and I've already spoken a bit about some of what we've worked on and what's coming further. In 2023, we're going to continue to build the professional foundations profile, which is part of the competency framework. It's going to cover some of the universal skills that agents are going to need and that already many have, but that will be with respect to communication, to work management, to working with others, etc. These are many of the key areas that are teachable and that help to reduce risk and enhance the delivery of services. CPATA is already working on redeveloping the qualifying exams for 2024 to align with the competency profiles and to reflect valid, reliable, and defensible best practices for administering exams. And that's a significant development that is ongoing. There are also two more areas where we're going to engage with the profession. One is around entry to practice. The current model, as you all know, involves a 2-year apprenticeship followed by qualifying exams. We're going to be reaching out to hear from the profession, from supervisors, from Class 3 agents, from firms, from others, as to what's working and where there may be areas where we could improve the apprenticeship approach to make sure it really helps as a pathway for those who are seeking entry into the profession. We're also going to explore other potentials, however, and we're going to look at what other jurisdictions are doing, what other professions are doing, to try to distill whether there may be other pathways that could be introduced to facilitate entry into the profession. At the end of the day, we want entry systems where people are equipped to acquire the competencies without facing unnecessary barriers. The second area where we'll be reaching out to the profession is around continuing professional development. We know from our surveys that patent agents and trademark agents are quite busy and connected and active. They're making sure that their skills are up to speed, both in terms of technical areas, as well as the legal areas around trademark law and patent law. And that's fantastic. We know that some are taking over 50 hours a year of continuing professional development. It's really important that this is ongoing because there are risks of skill degradation over time if you're not keeping your skills sharp. We want to look at what agents are already doing and what mandatory CPD requirements, if any, should be established by CPATA. We need a policy around this, and we're going to want to make sure that our licensees stay competent over time without creating significant reporting burdens. So we're likely going to hold consultations on CPD in 2024. Of course, if anyone has comments about any of these items before then, you're more than welcome to reach out. So the third area of our strategic plan is around professional regulation. One part is the Code of Conduct. It's a foundational document. It was great that there was a voluntary code initially through IPIC, but now we have a code that applies to all, and we're going to need to educate the profession broadly about it. And down the line, we'll be evaluating what's working and what's not and refining it. Another area are complaints and discipline. As I alluded to earlier, we're having some complaints come through, and we have seen a bit of an increase this year, but it's still unclear what the recurring volume is going to be and what the risks are going to be, or what the complexity of the investigations are going to be. So we're going to have to learn by doing and start saving for potential complex cases. When it comes to unauthorized practice, we're keeping an eye out on this area. We've received some inquiries and complaints about this, and we will act in high-risk situations where the public's affected. It's a tricky area for regulators, and we're taking a careful, cautious, thoughtful approach to make sure that we're alive to the issues. And with respect to IP agent privilege, we're continuing to support the continued evolution of this privilege in a manner that protects the public interest. Our fourth pillar is on building relationships and enhancing our communication. We're a new actor in this space, and we have to figure out a bit more how we can fit into Canada's IP ecosystem. We have had many discussions with IPIC and with others in the intellectual property space. We're looking forward to joining IPIC at its annual conference in Winnipeg this year, where I'll be speaking with another update. We work closely with our colleagues in government as well, and we have great relationships with many licensees who support our work. Finally, governance has to be part of our pillar. It's how we operate. It's how our work is overseen. We want to be as strong as possible. Part of that governance work was making sure that we have the financial resources to succeed. CPATA's board looked at the financial projections and was genuinely worried that the organization would not be financially viable or sustainable in the long run. Our financial statements are available online for anyone who wants to consult them. And our 2023 budget was also included in the board materials which you can find at the December 22 meeting materials. But when you look at all of these, or you look at our annual report, it was clear that the startup fees weren't sufficient for the longer term. And so the board made that difficult decision to raise fees, and it was not made lightly. But the financial trends we've witnessed in the early days of startup are that the annual revenues are not sufficient to sustain all elements of professional regulation that's required of the college by the government through the CPATA Act. It's difficult for us to act on such a tight budget. There's been no wiggle room this year. And with expected increased costs around complaint and the need to build reserves, we really did need to make a change. We have worked hard to balance the impact on the profession with our full statutory mandate and funding requirements. We know there's been sticker shock around the increases that start in 2024. Our goal was to communicate them as early as possible so that people could plan for them. And we know that this was hard news for licensees, but it will be simpler and clearer in future years to budget, given that there will only be a cost of living indexed increase under the current bylaws. This was a hard decision for a startup, but as CPATA matures, it's going to be easier to predict and provide the information around budget. As I mentioned, by 2025, we're expecting to have multi-year budgets that can be developed for everyone to see. So there's lots of work coming up in the next couple of years, lots of work that we've accomplished in the first 2 years, lots coming down the pipe. I want to open it up though now to hear from you. And so there's a Q&A in the Zoom screen, and you can send your questions there. If I miss you, I'm going to try to get to as many of the questions as I can today. But if I miss your question, just email it to info@CPATA/CABAMC. So info@CPATA-CABAMC.ca, and I'll provide you with a response. So I'm going to be looking at the questions right now. I know we've had a few, and let me start. So we've got a few questions now about, let me start with a governance question that's noting that there are no non-lawyer agents on the CPATA team, appointed or elected, and how has CPATA gone about understanding the unique needs and perspectives of this group of agents? So thank you for that question. We have been chatting with all sorts of people through the profession. I have had personal discussions with many people who are agents who are not lawyers. It's certainly important to keep in mind that there are different pathways into the profession, and there are many people who are not lawyers. So absolutely, our board has 4 agents, and they all this time happen to be lawyers, but they're also deeply connected into the IP agent professions, and also are able to reflect on the differences between lawyer and non-lawyer agents. So we're continuing to build the knowledge there. And of course, I'm happy to speak to anyone. So if there are non-lawyer agents who wish to provide further insights to me personally, please just reach out either to the info or CEO email, and happy to continue those conversations. So I have a question about insurance from someone who is a lawyer and trademark agent, and why CPATA's mandatory insurance is different from what's already provided under a professional liability insurance program for lawyers in Ontario. At the end of the day, this is an area where we have seen different risks take hold. And it really boils down to what is expected of a trademark agent and what are the types of risks that one can expect. There's also a need to manage the pool of people who are going to be insured over time. So when looking at CPATA's licensees, we needed to make sure that there was sufficient coverage and a certain universality to what our coverages would include. Just like people may have home insurance that includes certain risks that are lower risk to them or not necessarily applicable, there's a certain base requirement. The policy decision was made to require coverage that would cover someone anywhere, regardless of where a claim might be made, and regardless of which jurisdiction of law might be pleaded, because we have seen experiences in the intellectual property law world where these sorts of claims have arisen and where coverage has not been available. We also know that for many people, not all, but for many, in trademark, there are global entities in play, or where the trademark search might be international, or where others might come forward, even if something is for local use, where there may be disputes that arise that are of an international nature. And so at the moment, our policy requirements are that the insurance include and respond to foreign law claims and claims anywhere in the world. At the moment, there are certain insurers that insure lawyers where their policies are able to cover that. There are others where that is not the case at the moment. I understand that's being reviewed right now, but at the end of the day, our insurance is there to protect the public and also to protect trademark agents and patent agents from risks that we have seen and that we have heard from our insights from insurers and from agents themselves need to be covered off. So I've got another question about cost, and it's a very fair question about how the model works. The question is, given that CPATA is regulating in the public interest and not a self-regulating organization, is it entirely appropriate that solely licensees bear the entire cost of funding CPATA's activities? Are any other funding options being investigated as this moves forward, such as having the public partly fund? So I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking right now. Really, who pays for a public interest regulator is a government decision at the start, and something that CPATA can consider further. But most professional regulators, whether they are self-regulating or not, are called public interest regulators now. Public interest regulation is a term of art, that a legal term that's being included in many different types of professional regulatory organizations, including many self-regulating organizations. And it's there to indicate that regardless of whether you are self-regulating or an independent regulator, your responsibility is not just to licensee interests, it's to the public as a whole. It's to consumers, it's to your ecosystem, be it in health, in legal, in engineering, in this field. And so usually the public interest regulatory organization funds itself through fees of its licensees. That was the decision that was made in creating CPATA. That was ultimately a government decision. It's similar with what the approach has been with immigration consultants. It's similar to how other IP agent regulators that are independent have been funded in England and Wales. It is similar to how engineers, nurses, health professionals generally, lawyers, and many other professions are funded in Canada, even if some of the regulatory activities are not necessarily solely strictly for individual licensees' interests. There's always the open question as to whether other sources of funding should be explored. Certainly, there have been some who have suggested that the federal government should explore, for example, instituting some sort of levy through patent and trademark prosecutions, and that those who apply should all be subject to a levy. This was the approach taken at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, for example. So the USPTO model has been mentioned, but it's not one that seemed like it would be a viable change that could be instituted in the timeline that we needed as a regulator to make sure that we could maintain sufficient funds to be prepared for any eventuality. And so that's where we're at right now in terms of the funding model. The funding model is based primarily on licensing fees. We do have certain other fees around exams, et cetera, but the bulk of our income is based on licensing fees. And at the moment, that is CPATA's model. There's a question about requiring in-house agents to need insurance and whether that is required or justified. Our insurance requirements are dependent on who you serve. If you're an employee of an organization and you're only serving that organization, you're not acting on behalf of third parties, you are basically giving advice to a company about their IP needs, then an insurance policy is not required because you are only serving the corporation and the corporation can assume your risk yourself. If, however, you're an agent serving the public, regardless of whether you're a C1 or C2, then you need to obtain insurance. And that's to protect the public. It also reduces your risk when you're out there in practice. So there's a question here about whether measures have been taken or are being considered against entities that operate clearly out of bounds of the profession, even though no complaints have been filed against them. The answer is that when it comes to the area of unauthorized practice, we're not actively out there trying to find who may be offside. We are a small organization with a lot of area, a lot of terrain to cover. And so we are not taking that approach. We are dependent on receiving complaints from others in order to determine what next steps, if any, may be necessary, and to determine whether, in fact, what might at first glance appear to be offside is in fact offside, which requires a case-by-case analysis. It's been a question about whether there's been consideration given to the needs of sole practitioners and smaller agencies, and the answer is absolutely. We know you're a lifeline. We know that there are all sorts of different practices out there. I know that our board is acutely aware that there are differing needs depending on sectors served, depending on size of firm, depending on agencies and their niche. Certainly an area of ongoing discussion and consideration for us. And again, if you're a solo, and I've had chances to chat with many of you since starting this role, please reach out. I'd be happy to chat with you about the needs that you're facing and what are some of the priorities for you. So there's been a question about Class 2 agents versus Class 1. We indicated in our April email that Class 2 agents can undertake IP tasks, which can carry a risk of public harm, and what's meant by that, and what's the difference between the Class 2 and Class 1. The Class 1 is the full license. It includes prosecuting in front of CPO. The Class 2, the new Class 2 was created because we had heard from the profession that there are many who are in-house who wish to maintain their association with and continue to be a part of the IP agent profession, who may not be doing the prosecution work at the moment, but who are engaging in the steps up to that gate. And so the hope, and that's not just in-house, that can be people in firms, that can be people in different settings, but the intention there was to enable those who are doing those tasks, but not doing prosecutorial work for whatever reason, to still be able to be part of the profession and to continue to do that important work. The initial class was not, the initial inactive class was not intended to cover those people. Those people were intended to be considered as full licensees, but because there were some concerns about that, and because some people are not doing that prosecutorial work, we created a new license that is slightly less expensive than the full license to create a new option for those in that space. We maintain an insurance requirement because there is risk to clients when this sort of work is being done. even if it's not a prosecution, there's lots of other work up to that step where if an agent makes a mistake, engages in professional, makes a mistake in their professional skill or judgment, it's important that there's some sort of protection mechanism in place so that if there truly was a mistake and if it truly did cause harm, then there may be some form of compensation ultimately available to the client. And so that's why there's mandatory insurance for Class 2 agents when they're doing public-facing work. So there's a question about the expense for those who are lawyer agents, lawyer trademark agents, to pay duplicate fees and duplicate insurance, and whether we're keeping track of the number of agents who are intending to leave the profession. And so let me say first off that we understand that there have been new costs now that patent agents and trademark agents are subject to a more robust form of professional regulation. But we also understand that whether you are a lawyer or an engineer or don't have a prior professional designation, from our perspective, an agent is an agent is an agent. And so if you're a lawyer, if you want to do the work that is exclusive to patent agents and trademark agents in front of CPO, you need to be an agent. It's a separate profession. And with it, there are separate costs. And so we understand that this is more expensive, but if you're engaging in this work, then this is the new cost of regulation, is to have this fee, and possibly, depending on where you are working as a lawyer, you may need to get a second insurance policy. The second insurance policy is one, if you need one, that differs in significant areas from CPATA's perspective. And so at the moment, for the reasons I've already given around insurance, there's a second insurance requirement. I do know that certain jurisdictions are looking to see whether their lawyer professional liability programs are able to meet our requirements, and we'll continue to monitor that. And if there are any updates, I will share them as they come available. We will share them as they come available. But at the moment, if your professional liability lawyer insurance program does not cover the risks identified as live to CPATA agents, then you need to go and obtain the second level of coverage. So there's a question about our governance, turning to why CPATA requires members of our board and directorship to be separate and to not be part of IPIC. What aspect of membership in IPIC is considered incompatible with being a CPATA committee member? So this comes back to our founding legislation, which created strict protocols around governance to separate out government and IPIC representatives on our board. The idea was that those associations that are advancing the profession's interests should be detached from the governance structure. That is a statutory requirement. And so in broad terms, we've had people who are on our board, for example, who are very familiar with IPIC, at times past presidents of IPIC, who have presented at webinars on behalf of IPIC, who attend IPIC's annual meetings, who are very familiar with the group, but who are no longer members of IPIC, who are still deeply involved. And so we continue to hear from the profession. We continue to hear from IPIC directly. We continue to also hear from individual licensees, and it creates, so there is a governance separation, which is not entirely uncommon in modern professional regulators. But we still are able to obtain helpful input from the professions writ large. So there have been more questions about about fees. So let's get to one that asked about, given the small member base, can our funding models be sustained? And the answer is that we have done some preliminary research that suggests that this model is sustainable. That is being the feedback to date. We are going to be doing more to survey the profession, likely closer to the fall when decisions have to be made around renewal, when people are thinking about insurance, when people are thinking about which licenses they wish to maintain. But our sense from initial conversations is that while this was a significant increase in fees, no doubt, that those who are prosecuting are going to maintain their licenses, and for the most part, those who have taken all of these steps to become licensed are going to, for the most part, want to maintain their licenses to be able to continue to hold out as patent agents and trademark agents and do that work. It's a question about whether we engaged in discussions with the USPTO to determine which classes of license are sufficient to maintain reciprocal license to practice before the USPTO. It's our understanding that C1 licensees are able to engage in reciprocity with the USPTO. I'm loving how many questions are coming in. I'm really appreciative of it, and I apologize it takes me a bit of time to get through them, but we're getting there. There's a question about our multi-stage process for complaints handling. We have a multi-stage system for handling complaints. It's from our constituting legislation. We have a registrar, the investigations committee, the discipline committee. The question is, for a small regulator, this seems like a complex piece of machinery to fund and operate. Are you aware of any simpler models for handling complaints used by other professional regulators that might be used, recognizing that this would require legislative change? So excellent question. Yes, there are all sorts of different ways that this could be structured. We're going to have to continue to look at this to see whether there might be lighter touch options that might be better suited. At the moment, it seems to be working well. The investigations committee doesn't receive all the complaints. I have some jurisdiction to address some complaints at the outset, and that's through some new changes that came into place recently. We also have the investigations committee and discipline committee, but the discipline committee is like a tribunal. They're really the last stop, and they sit almost like an administrative tribunal, like a court. And so you could see them as separate, as almost like a mini court as opposed to a committee. The investigation committee helps guide the work and makes that initial judgment call as to whether something should proceed. A lot of regulators have something along those lines, so it's not just staff making decisions about what to advance. It's really people from the profession and with expertise in investigations who can look at these claims and decide whether they should be advanced further. So right now they play a pretty important role, and we'll just have to see. And certainly if it seems like it's too much for the organization, then we would raise that as a concern with government. But in the early days, so far, it's being managed. So there's a good question here about what do we see as the role or purpose of continuing education. For lawyers, I've required CLE as a lawyer, continuing legal education, and it feels like a waste of time, says one person. The best ways to update my knowledge, like reading case law, don't satisfy the requirements. What are we hoping to establish by requiring CLE? So that's a great question. And I think that's actually a question we're going to be putting back to the profession. Right now, we haven't issued any policy on this. There is a real question about whether there should be continuing professional development requirements, and if so, what they should be. There are also different ways that one might structure continuing professional development requirements. Some people believe that it's important for the public to know that people are actually taking active efforts to maintain their skills and to be able to keep up with the rapidly changing world. And so the mandatory continuing professional development requirements can help to meet that. There are some who say that taking this education is also vitally important for the professionals to make sure that they do not lose their skills. Skills degradation is something that professional regulators have explored and do examine. For a technical area like patent agent and trademark agent work, that might be a higher risk factor that would point towards ensuring that there is lifelong learning so that people don't get rusty and cause mistakes. More generally, though, there are questions about if the profession is doing these things already, do we need a policy? If we're going to adopt a policy, should it be prescriptive? Should it require, for example, certain courses? Should it require a certain number of hours of instruction? Should it permit other things like study groups or reading case law or other types of pathways to ensure that your learning is up to speed? Should it require anything else? There are some who have moved towards a system that doesn't count hours, but rather says, you know yourself best, prepare a learning plan so that you can ensure that your skills for your niche practice are being maintained. So at the moment, we're quite open-minded, and we're going to want to hear from the profession about what sort of approach might make sense. We're also going to hear from others about what consumers might expect, for example, and we'll try to craft a policy after hearing from everyone. There's another related question around CPD and whether it may duplicate requirements from law societies. I suspect that the risk of duplication is going to be a significant consideration for our board. I certainly wouldn't want us to see duplication in terms of having to take the same course twice. I could see efficiencies where if a course being offered that meets a legal continuing professional development or engineering professional development requirement, if it also relates to your patent agent or trademark agent practice, that you would be able to count it for both, assuming that there is any counting to be done. It's a question about whether the college has considered a patent attorney license classification and whether the college has concerns with lawyers who are not patent agents conducting patent litigation. I think this is a question about whether or not we're interested in regulating lawyers who are doing patent litigation. And the answer is that is outside our jurisdiction and not particularly of concern to us. Certainly, those patent litigators who have studied intellectual property in depth and perhaps become patent agents themselves would presumably have incredible skill and be able to work effectively on behalf of clients with that expertise to bear. But lawyers are separately regulated, and there is nothing within the scope of patent agent or trademarks, for that matter, for trademark agent work that would be exclusive around litigation. The exclusive areas for patent agents and trademark agents are in terms of acting and prosecuting in front of CPO. And so if we're talking about courtroom-based litigation, there are others who can take that up, and many who likely are able to do so competently because it is a different area of expertise and not one that we regulate. We're not particularly concerned about it. There's a question about USPTO work, which notes that it requires a member of a state bar for responding to trademark office actions. Has there been any movement in getting this waived for us under the reciprocity arrangement? The answer is that CPATA has not taken any steps on this regard at this time. A question about who's the public in CPATA's view. Given the note of public interest, is it not IP rights holders? That's a great question. And the public includes licensees. It includes potential future students who wish to become apprentices in time, who wish to join the profession. It certainly includes IP rights holders. It includes government. It includes the public in general. A healthy IP system, which is able to be efficient and protect rights, is good for all Canadians, and so truly, it's the entire public, and that's part of what makes regulations so complex. Is that you're really trying to take in all these different stakeholders' views into account when determining what truly is in the public interest. Question that I've got time for one more question, and sorry, I know I missed a couple along the way, but please just email me. Is there or will there be the ability to use CPATA as a certification mark to emphasize that agents are licensed, such as an email, letter signature lines? At this time, it is advertised as an official mark. Are there plans for a certification mark for use by licensees? Thank you for the question. So you're right, CPATA is doing its initial steps to protect our own intellectual property. And we have currently applied for official mark status for CPATA's logo, for CPATA's name, both in English and in French. The question as to whether or not to introduce some sort of mark that could be used by licensees is one that has been considered at a preliminary level. It is interesting and something we may explore in the future. It's not something that's open for the immediate term, given everything else that's on our plates right now, but it is something that's a back burner idea that we are potentially going to return to. And if that is something that would be of interest or might be of benefit to licensees, then that would be an important factor for us to know. So unfortunately, we've reached 12:30. We've got lots of questions in. I'm counting 26 of them. I hope I covered most of them, but please, if I missed you, please reach out and we will answer as many of these as we can. But I wanted to thank you all for coming. We know that your time is super valuable, and we really appreciate all of you taking this time to learn more about the work that we're doing and to try to engage with us. We certainly appreciate all these questions. I'm honored to serve and truly honored that you've decided to spend your time with us today. We are going to email you a short survey. I promise you it's short, and it's really about these Q&A sessions and how we can work them forward for the benefit of all, if you think this is a helpful model. So please, when you get that email, let us know your thoughts. Thank you for coming today, and till the next time. Thanks again.